you can be comparing undefined against undefined, or an empty string against an empty string, and then you let someone through the gate rather than blocking them at the gate because you're relying on type coercion. That's why this pattern feels dangerous. There's two category problems here I'd like to fix. One category is that every element of a collection throughout the entire code base is just named E. And another one is multiplying by 1 and adding a string, an empty string, in order to coerce a value, which, and particularly in the case of coercing the string, this can lead to bugs and security vulnerabilities, particularly when you're talking about a user ID. I'm not entirely sure, because I guess this user ID comes from the database, so we're guaranteed that this user ID from the database must be not null if the database constraint holds, which I'm pretty sure it does, because I think that that's a primary key and a reference foreign key, so the constraint should always hold that this must be a number. So that should be fine. But this may be coerced into undefined, and the security issue, if you have to put on the mental load of tracing back where did E come from, where did partners users come from, what did partner user.query return? Okay, if I have to put on the mental load of tracing back from here to here to here to know, oh, this is a database object, therefore this is not a security concern. That's more the problem. The person who wrote this code was actually really, really good at choosing conditions that don't actually have security issues. But in order to audit it, there's a lot of mental strain on having to go back and look up. Whereas if we can do a triple equals, and if I can be certain that I'm not going to be comparing undefined against undefined, because that's a somewhat common vulnerability in password systems, is that you could simply, for a certain users that their account's not set up, you could just do a direct post to the API with an empty password. And if the account hasn't been set up and they don't have the password in the database, because say, for example, you have a magic link or something like that. I don't know that this is actually, maybe saying it's common is too strong, but you can have a condition where you can manually put in an empty password or have the password be undefined, or similar situations are common. The category is common. Then you can be comparing undefined against undefined, or an empty string against an empty string, and then you let someone through the gate rather than blocking them at the gate because you're relying on type coercion. That's why this pattern feels dangerous. The person who wrote the code knows that there is no danger here. But me looking at the code, every time I see this, I have to go trace it back and make sure it's not dangerous. Whereas if we use the correct type from the get-go, then I don't have that same problem. And the better type, I think in this case, would be an integer, especially because nan is not equal to nan. So we do have the safeguard that if somehow this were to become nan, that will not be equal to nan and it won't be equal to 0. So I'm looking at partner users. User is owner. This message makes sense. And then it says here removing member is the user ID. So it is the member who removes. It is the remover. I don't know that this is true. This looks wrong on a few different levels. It says removing member, but it's actually an array. Again, this is just one of those things where, but I am contradicting myself, right? So I'm saying it's better to not have semantics than to have bad semantics. And I'm saying I don't like that everything in the code base is named E. But assuming that the person who wrote the code is not skilled in the art of semantics, then were they to have tried half-heartedly, then the result might have been worse than what we have, because right now we always know that it's an exercise to the reader to figure out what E might mean. But it would have been worse, perhaps, for E to have been named something that was apart from what it is.